Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So
Yeah,
continue.
good.
You're to bring
Yeah,
it. We're talking. You're sharing how you had the empathy circle, and then you had discussion afterwards, and it didn't feel quite as satisfying as the empathy circle itself. And you wanted now you're wanting to bring it back to the topic of the way of being.
yes.
Hmm.
So I wonder if by entering into an ordinary conversation, we'd slowed down, we were listening deeply, but maybe by it becoming a conversation, we weren't really feeling each other's presence.
So you think that it was nice, the empathy circle, and you felt a sort of a depth of connection. But then when it became a normal conversation, you think you're kind of trying to explore why, what kind of happened. It's like you think maybe you just weren't feeling each other's presence.
Yeah, which is, I think, one of the hallmarks of the definition of empathy as a way of being. For me, it's very much this idea of feeling the other person's presence.
Yeah, so a way of being is really about feeling the other person's presence.
Yeah, and it's operating, I think, from a spacious enough a way of being that is so spacious and deep that you become very aware of other, not just your own individual awareness, but the collective
Mm,
awareness as a
mhm.
way of being.
Yes, this way of being senses has awareness of everyone, the whole collective, instead of just your own sense of yeah, your own self.
And it feels that a way, I could use the term way of being as just, well, a Christian would say, I have a Christian way of being. A Buddhist or an atheist has a way of being. So what's the difference in this definition of way of being?
Yeah, and other different people will say that they have different ways of being, different religions, and are their way of being different from this
Mm.
way of being?
And I do think it's this kind of relational approach that invites really heartfelt connection and that shared presence as a result of empathetic listening.
And this approach has so that creates that heartfelt connection and
Mm,
presence.
yeah, it's very relational. Yeah.
And so you're really making an
But my
emphasis on the relational aspect of it.
Yeah, and my I suppose my concern by having just that as the definition, that empathy is a way of being, it, it's so general, how to make it specific.
Yeah, the way of being, empathy as a way of being is very broad, but and you want to look at what are the specific aspects of it, get
And I'm sure I've
specific.
spoken for long enough, and it's someone else's
It's
turn.
untimed. We don't time. We didn't time with last time so you can speak because until you feel complete. So
uh, I think probably I need to reflect. Yeah,
okay.
slow
Uh-huh.
down. Thank you. So I feel fully heard, Edwin, as
Okay.
always. Thank you.
Speak to Kara then. Um, yeah, I had hoped that more people would be here because everybody brings these unique perspectives, and I just appreciate all the perspectives that people bring. And Wendy brings this felt experience perspective, and I think it's really important.
I hear you. We're hoping that more people would be here and bring their different and varied perspectives and diversify the conversation. And I heard that you recognize Wendy's ability to have a felt experience.
Yeah, that is there's I think that the way of being has a felt experience, there's a feeling of it, and to be able to articulate the landscape of that feeling is really important, and the nuances of it too is an important part of that way of being.
So I heard you feel that having a way of being is a felt experience, and being able to articulate not just that that is happening, but the nuances and the details of what it is to have a felt experience is really important.
And when I have that feeling of the empathic way of being, I
Oh,
feel when that's not happening, like, right, if there's a rupture in it, it's like some other feeling is in the space, and that's how I sort of test if I'm in that empathic space, because I can feel myself and say there's something not right here. There's a feeling in this space that's not the empathic way of being.
so when you are in that empathic space and you are feeling that wholeness, you can feel when something comes in and disrupts that entire space. And then you're like, wait, that's a disruptive something. What is that? Because
Hmm.
it's not the same as the other way of being.
Yeah. For example, there was someone who was very disruptive in the empathy circle. They would come to kind of like almost be like a troll, and then people want to shut them down. To say, oh, we got to get rid of this person. And I think that an empathic space is inclusive. Uh, I could feel that. Oh, let's shut him down. Let's get rid of him. And it's like, well, an empathic space is inclusive, and it's not. It doesn't have that, pushing out like that.
So you gave an example of someone who came to a empathy circle as a troll and brought in a non-empathetic energy, and you could feel how it changed the empathetic space to a non-empathetic space, because by its nature, for you, empathy is an inclusive space. So when people started to want to push this troll out, that was not being empathetic.
Yeah, and then he also kind of did all kinds of criticisms on Facebook, and there's a tendency when people are sort of attacking you to put up a wall and get rid of them, and I said no. What the empath? I could feel that. I said no, that's not what I want to do. It's like what I want to do is include them, and so reached out and said, let's have an empathy circle to discuss it. So every time there was a criticism, I would say, let's have an empathy circle, discuss it. And then we had multiple empathy circles and it all got kind of resolved.
So I'm hearing that it transferred out into the Facebook world, and there was even more of this push them out, shut them down, block them off kind of attitude, energy going on. And you were like, whoa, 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 that's not the empathy space we are creating. Let's talk about this. You have a different point of view. Let's have an empathy circle about it. And in doing so, you were able to, through several empathy circles, bring that space back to an inclusive space so that everybody was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and but I could feel in myself wanting to join that. Let's get rid of this problem, right? It's like in even offering to dialogue with the person felt like giving up something in myself, like I was acquiescing to them. I could feel that in part of me, just wanting the wall. I'm not going to acquiesce. I'm just going to have this wall. But then also saying, well, on the other hand, saying having an empathy circle to transform this is what I'm about. So this is an opportunity to have an empathy circle. So the conflict is fine. It's like, because it's an opportunity to have an empathy circle. So there was these conflicting feelings.
Yeah.
And then I went down that one route that I just felt very satisfied with the way it turned out.
So I heard that you fully recognize how almost intrinsic it is to want to put that wall up, to be like,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to deal with this. But you chose a way of being that was the way you say you want to be, that empathetic way. You chose that, and it was really hard at some points. But in choosing it and in doing it, it really came to the conclusion you wanted. It had the outcome that you were looking for.
Yeah, I feel deeply heard. Thank you.
Yeah. I will talk to Miss Wendy. We'll just go round and round and round.
Go
There-
for it, Alice.
Wonderful. So I thought all since our Tuesday chat about this way of being, and one of the things that came up in our chat on Tuesday was the facets. There's so many facets of a way of being, kind of those, what we've already talked about, the nuance, the landscape of the feeling of the reality.
So since your talk on Tuesday about way of being and the definition with empathy, you've just been thinking about it so much, and you're very, very aware of the facets, the many, many facets of way of being.
So for me, I guess I've kind of come to, I'm just going to verbally diarrhea some language that came up for me around it. So it was, there is a being, and that being has ways of being, both within themselves and within a community. So when you're talking about a way of being, you kind of have to talk about the being who's being that being, and then the group that is with that being in the way that they are being. Good luck with that, sorry.
So you're sharing that you've been sort of having verbal diarrhea about some of the language, and what came to you was that, you know, there's this being, and then there's that being has ways of being, both within themselves and then within community, and you're just speculating about what being and being really means.
Yes, well done. So I thought about, so I kind of broke it down to, there's the being, as in the entity, the human, the being. And that's kind of like, so I went to our diamond analogy that we're already working with within the group. And so like the being is a rock, is a, you know, a diamond that at its original being is a rock. And then to learn to be, we gain skills, we gain tools, we gain mindsets, right? The choices that we make. And those are like the facets that turn a rock into a diamond, right? And then your choices to use those skills, those tools, and that mindset, kind of like what Evan was saying, those choices to not just go with your natural rock inclination, but choose a way of being, kind of creates we've already kind of talked about it today, a bubble of space around you. By making that choice, it's almost like the rainbow glow of your facets get to kind of create a little bubble around you. I'll pause that, that's it.
Okay, so I hear you say that, you know, focusing on this being and the facets, many facets, this rock, you wanted to break that down. There's the being that's the entity, the human being, and then when you compare that with the diamond analogy, you know, that diamond is actually originally a rock, and what's made that rock into a diamond, if you use that analogy with us as beings, we have the skills, the tools, the mindsets that we develop, and it's to do with the choices we make that makes that way of being into this diamond with all its facets.
Yeah. And by choosing a way of being, rather than just allowing the way you are being, when you shape yourself, it's more than just you become the diamond, but you create almost a prismatic bubble around yourself of that. Kind of like, oh, you know, so we know that we're feeling our feelings in ourselves, but it's almost like you get to expand that, and other people can step into that way of being simply by being around you. God, there's a lot of beings in this conversation.
Yeah, and from what you're saying then, I remember I forgot to include that thing about a bubble. And you know, you're saying that it's the choices we make, that's the key, the choices, and that allows our being to be shaped depending on the choices we make. And it's more than just, you know, that the diamond, it's more than the diamond. There's this, I think you said, prismatic bubble around the diamond that invites people in, and allows, you know, again, depending on the choices that you make, this prismatic bubble will allow the diamond to shine and be radiant.
Yeah. And then you're talking about how we are within community. So this whole empathy thing is not just about you and your diamond, but it's about you, your diamond, and the rest of the diamonds that you're around. And that's kind of like, I don't know, like in an atom, the way that the electrons swirl around the protons in the nucleus, right? And they come together and they separate. And when they are magnetically charged, when the energy is matching, they go to each other. And when that energy does not, it's like, and that kind of is like what Edwin was saying, how you just naturally want to be like, no. But if you could choose to engage that negative energy and bring it in, what a change that makes.
So what I heard was you're reflecting on the importance of community. It's not just the way of being, when we're on our own. It's the whole thing about the the bubbles, the industry that makes the diamond, as it were, and the idea that it's not just your diamond and your facets, it's all the other diamonds that are around us. And then that you were talking about the protons and the nucleus and the electrons all swirling round, and there's something quite magically charged about that, and the energy that is created kind of matches up, I think, with the community's energy. And you referred back to what Edwin had been saying about this, there can be a rupture in the diamonds. But
yeah. So I don't know how that helps us define what we think of a way of being, but I think that we are starting to really dive into the language we've already kind of agreed to, the diamond and the facets and how much more we can, and varied places that we can take that same analogy to really drive this whole empathy concept home.
Not sure I heard it all because I'm leaning back a bit, but I think what I heard, sorry, I know you're busy as well, multitasking like most mums. So I think I heard you say that, in a way, this discussion on the way of being and the diamond analogy, we've been using that. So how are we building on that? How is it going to be, a different use? It's to do with the communities, I think. I think I lost it.
No, I think that was pretty accurate. That's exactly how that kind of thought felt like. Here's the thing we have, and we should dive some more into that. And then I trailed off. No, I think you nailed it. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. I'm thoroughly impressed by you rocking the babe to bed and to sleep, feeding whatever, and maybe this is a way of being. Your empathy as a mother at this moment is, and I almost feel like we're kind of rupturing that in a little bit, referring back to what Edwin was saying. So I'm really aware that he needs your time, attention, and love at this moment.
So who are you speaking to?
Right, can we reflect that back? I totally will. You want to?
Oh, sorry, I didn't even. No, I was just reflecting on you as a mother at this moment. Sorry, I wasn't. This is a unique experience for me. Watching breastfeeding and rocking and talking about things. Anyway, so yes, let's get back. So Edwin, please, would you be my listener?
Okay, yeah, I'm listening, and you're just talking about Cara and her way of being and doing multiple child care and empathic listening all at once.
Yeah, I think this is a lovely analogy somewhere. you know,
Uh,
a mum feeding her babe, and the way of being in that moment and that closeness. You know, you're not active theoretically when you're feeding the babe and rocking the babe, you're not you know, you're not listening, you're not reflective listening or active listening, and yet you are listening totally, but not to any words.
yeah, so when you're a mother and feeding a baby, you're very actively listening, maybe not reflective listening, but it's a deep form of listening. So you see that as one aspect of empathy.
It's a good it's a good analogy, which I would never have thought of if you hadn't given us this opportunity, Cara. So thank you. Yeah, but it is. It's like the babe's not saying. I mean, but you know whether to
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
whether to kiss its foot.
yeah, there's a lot of empathy there. There's a lot of sensitivity to all the different motions and movements and that are done.
Yeah, so it's yeah, I'm just reflecting on the word that you used, Edwin, of rupture, of how that feels, you know, viscerally in the body, and how to move on from it.
Yeah, you're just thinking about the word rupture and how when you feel that rupture, how do you move on from a rupture like that?
Because I suppose innately that rupture
Mm.
on one level is just as much a way of being as a feeling of close and warm, embracing community. You know, they're both ways of being.
Yeah, so a rupture is also a way of being. So you're seeing sort of an equality of experience and feelings within that.
Yeah, now it's interesting you use the word equality of experience, I suppose, because yeah, for me, the rupture, it's not equal, you know, to that sense of warm, embodied community, that sense of presence. So it's not equal, but they're both part of being.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so there's that warm feeling, and a rupture is not necessarily equal to it, but it's part of being, part of
And
life.
yeah, I think it's the rupture kind of allows for the growth, you know. I mean, one of, I suppose, my concerns, if everything was all, you know, warm and cozy, how much would I actually learn and grow? And often it's from the rupture, which is the most challenging bit, the, you know, fractious friendships or relationships. It's the
Mm,
growth through that. Just
mhm. Yeah, so the growth happens by how you deal with those ruptures, and if you didn't have those ruptures, there would be no growth happening.
I think there's more likely to, I mean, on one level, I think there's more likely to be stagnation. You know, the fact that the situation you described, Edwin, of reaching out to this person and creating the empathy circle, and assuming the fact that you've used that analogy, you know, it was very important in your understanding of this process.
Yeah, so my reaching out in the rupture and offering the empathy circle to this person you see was the importance of it for me and my own empathic sort of process.
Yeah, it's you know, there's a Bach choir performing in my village and coming up, and their advert is the profane and the sacred, and I love that balance. And so maybe it's a bit like that, you know, the rupture on one level is the profane, the warm community is the sacred, but it's like, yeah, we need
Mm.
both.
Yeah, we need both. And like a Bach concert, that they have the title of the sacred and profane, and maybe they're both needed. Something you're trying to figure out how to sort of navigate that.
Yeah, because you know, by saying way of being, you know, it kind of implies it's all going to be positive, it's all going to
Mm,
be
hmm.
you know, compassionate and kind. And actually, you know, quite often my mind and that maybe other people's mind isn't like that. You know, it can be jealous, or it can be, you know, vindictive, or, you know, all these kind of emotions can arise, and yet I don't like to identify those with me as a way of being, and yet that, you know, they are a part of me.
Yeah, so there's all these feelings that come up, jealousy, vindictiveness, etc., that maybe are seen as negative, and they do come up in you. You have to recognize those. It's not an empathic way of being. It's just not all warm and fuzzy kind of. You got all these other feelings arising.
Yeah, and yeah, I liked Kara's use of the word choice. You know, how by being in the moment, by having that sense of presence, you know, I can choose not to go with the anger or the jealousy. I can go with the empathy and the compassion, and that choice, that is the important part of being.
And the aspect of choice that Kara's brought up about you can go with one feeling or the other, you can make a choice. And it's like, that's really the important part, is being able to make that choice.
Mm. Okay, I feel fully heard, Edwin. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll speak back to you, Wendy.
Okay.
So this aspect, I've thought more about empathy in the feeling aspect, you know, the felt experience, and somehow I don't go as deeply into that felt experiences as I really see that I would like to, you know. So I appreciate you bringing up these feelings aspects, because you kind of help keep that awareness of the felt experience.
So you're sharing that you're interested in that felt experience part of being, and you're reflecting that maybe you'd like to explore that a little more, and you're expressing gratitude for that having been brought up.
Yeah, because I actually see that as central to empathy, because I think that's what empathy is how do we navigate our felt experience, the world of felt experience, and are sensitive to that, to navigate that felt experience world.
Yeah, and you're sharing that you feel this is actually central, you know, how we feel, and how that feeling aspect of the felt experience is actually key to defining empathy.
Yeah, it's not just defining, but the whole empathic way of being. It's like central to the empathic way of being is being sensitive to the felt experience in myself and others, and how to navigate that.
Yeah, so you feel that this is key, that to the empathic way of being, and how it's navigated is how we are in touch with our feelings.
And the aspect that what I see is one aspect of navigating that is, if there's the warm, fuzzy, empathic, sensitive feelings, and then there's maybe a jealousy or an anger or, you know, constriction feelings arising, is how to navigate that. That's what you were sort of starting to address. And I think that's sort of a central question. How do we navigate uh, those feelings?
Yeah, so you're summarizing what I was saying about, you know, this choice between following kind of angry feelings or jealous feelings, and as opposed to the warm fuzzy ones, and how we navigate that. You're sharing, you feel, is key.
And I think that what empathy is, the centrality of empathy is feeling into. So it's not like, hey, I'm going to make a decision here between, you know, the anger or, you know, this niceness or whatever. It's the feeling into each of them, the sensing into. It's like, oh, I see there's anger. And part of that is sharing it. Oh, I see there's anger arising, and then feeling into the anger and see what comes beyond it, but within it. And yeah.
So you're sharing that you think that empathy is actually central to that. The centrality of empathy is feeling into it's the importance of the feeling into, and it's not a matter of making a decision between whether you're going to follow the anger or follow the niceness. It's that feeling into whatever emotion arises.
And yeah, and it's sort of like, it sort of reveals the next step, sort of arises when you feel into it, you know, if is from my experience. And that's what I want to get better at, is to be able to sense what is the feelings that are rising in me, and to be able to share those, you know, openly and sort of transparently or honestly.
So what I hear you saying is that it's the next step is revealed, and it sort of arises in you when you feel into it. That next step becomes clear, and from your experience, you want to get better at being able to sense that. You want to get better of noticing what the feelings are that you're rising, and be able to share those, to feel into those openly and transparently and honestly.
Yeah, and that's a different approach than, oh, I feel some, let's say, jealousy arising and I got to suppress it, right? And it's like, oh, I'm feeling some jealousy here. That feels kind of interesting. What is that all about? For, you know, and going into it and seeing what comes up. So it's sort of facing it, sensing into it, versus, you know, trying to suppress it.
Yes, so you're sharing your sense of curiosity in this process, that you don't feel that you want to, if you notice an emotion arising, you don't want to suppress it, you don't want to transform it, you want to actually be curious about it, to notice it. You're feeling some jealousy arising. Oh, well, that's interesting. You know, what's going to come up next, and you want to face it. You know, sensing into it, facing it.
And then I can actually and I don't want to force myself not to repress it. There could be some repression of it arising, but then noticing, oh, I see, I have a feeling of really wanting to suppress that, constrict that jealousy, if it, or, you know, or whatever the feeling is. So it's a sense of always stepping back from the feelings that are rising and sensing into them. And so this is really part of the way of being. I think that's what the empathic way of being is. It's this constant sensing into my own experiences as they arise, and others. It's sort of at an ideal kind of level.
So you want to be able to notice the feelings as they arise. You don't want to force yourself to suppress or repress anything. You want to think, well, I'm feeling this now. What's the next step going to be? And you feel that this arising and sensing of the emotions, this is really the essence of the way of being. You think that's what the empathetic way of being is, that constant sensing into your own experiences as they arise.
Yep. I feel fully heard.
Thank you. Is it your turn? Oh.
No, I think you listen, you get to talk again.
Oh yeah, so it's my turn, sorry. I was so busy listening, it's like, oh yeah, I have to speak now. Sorry.
Who would you like to speak to?
Oh, that, okay. Cara, may I speak with you, please?
Listening.
Is Leon asleep?
Oh, he went to go get mozzarella from Daddy.
Sorry, just need to come into myself. I'm just speaking with kind of what's on top. One of my concerns sometimes with this process of being the speaker is that feeling that I need to speak. And sometimes I just, want to be very quiet and hear what the body's saying.
So I hear sometimes one of the challenges of being the speaker is that you actually have to do the speaking part, and what you really need is just a minute to kind of feel.
Yeah, so that's, I suppose, when I think about the way of being, yes, words are part of way of being, but for me, much more is what's happening kind of internally. And if I'm in a busy situation or a quiet situation, that external stuff is one thing, but it's what's happening inside. How quiet am I inside?
So I heard that in the way of being, words, the whole external portion is part of it, most certainly, but really for you, what is bigger, what is more impactful is the internal stuff, how you are holding that space inside.
Yeah, it's that slowing down of the process, and in order to listen to others deeply, I need to listen to myself deeply, and that empathetic way of being is just not going to be there if I just focus on the word, on speaking some words.
So I heard it's part of your way of slowing down, of being able to put yourself first so that you can have space for the otherness, whatever the words are that are coming at you, you have space to take that in.
Gosh, you're a good listener.
You're a good listener.
You've done this before. Yeah, so it's way of being. It's what keeps coming for me, is just how living it is important, but the point of this group is to define it so that a course can be run and other people can benefit from the value of our ruminations about what way of being means.
So I heard that way of being is, clearly there's a way of living the way of being, but the whole point to this is to really define it so that you can train it and you can share it.
Yeah, and so it's only going to be a short, a couple of hours each week for 5 or 6 or however many weeks. So I feel like we get to the essence. And my challenge is that way of being, as I have said before, can apply to anything. I can have a communist way of being, I can have a Trumpian way of being, and it's like, how is an empathetic way of being to be defined differently?
So here you're thinking that, you only have a couple of hours to dive into this very, very deep subject, and really at its essence, a way of being could be any way of being, whether someone sees it positive or negative. And so how do we define the empathetic way of being as different than any of the other ways of being?
Yeah. And I suppose it's making, just to combine some of the things you said, some of the things that Edwin said, it's making that choice to be curious about what is arising and to not suppress it, to observe it, and hopefully transform it into the sharing of space, speaking and listening with others.
It was good. Don't comment, just reflect. So in looking at the how to define empathy as its own thing, as its way of being, as its own thing, you use some of the words you've heard as we've discussed this, and it's about choosing to be curious about what is coming up so that you don't suppress it, but instead kind of observe it, transform it, share it, and be able to create a space for it to exist with others.
Thank you. I feel fully heard, Cara. Thank you very much.
I don't know, we'll circle back around to you.
Okay.
So I really like that. I think focusing on the how do we define empathy as something different, and I think we've really hit on some of those key things. So we have a clear understanding of what it is to be a being, but an empathetic being. I agree with both of you that it is a choice to engage the things that are uncomfortable, and not even to change them, but to simply see them, to feel them, allow them run their course through your body so that you can move on from it.
So I heard you say that, you know, you're circling back to the idea of actually defining this way of being, this empathetic way of being, and that it's a choice, you know, to actually move into this way of being. It's
Yeah, it's an empathetic way of being. As I've been listening to the conversation, what come up for me is that the empathetic way of being is choosing to recognize the felt feeling, give it its space, and let it be.
so you're saying that for you, choosing a way of being is choosing to recognize that felt feeling and letting it be.
Yeah. So the empathetic way of being is allowing, I'm going to do it again. The empathetic way of being is allowing any being to be as they are, with really no expectations, exceptions, rules, or regulations. You simply create a space where that being gets to be its being in front of other beings. Sorry, that was so many beings.
So you're sharing the need for space to allow this, you know, you recognize the felt experience, you let it be, and you mirror what, you know, the space is really important. And it anybody can do this, and you know, anybody can have this empathetic way of being, because it allows anybody to make those choices, to recognize the felt experience, but the space is important.
Yeah, and then you said the mirror thing, which I didn't, but I think that that's really the empathetic way of being, is allowing whatever that other being is being, and then holding up a mirror so it can see itself.
So the empathetic way of being is like holding up a mirror so that you know, it can see itself. The empathetic way of being.
And yeah, and then it can choose. They can choose. The feeling can choose to express itself more. If it needs to do more, or it can be like, no, yep, that's me, cool, and kind of just go off on its own way. In seeing itself, it knows what it needs, and so an empathetic way of being creates a space to allow us to see ourselves, do what we need so we can do for others.
So an empathetic way of being creates the space so we can see ourselves, and allow that same space for others so they can be who they are.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. That's all my thoughts.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, yeah,
You want to speak to?
Edwin,
Listening.
sorry. Yeah, I'm just, I don't know, the vision that keeps coming up is just like crowds and crowds and crowds of people. And each one, I don't know, almost like at a Nazi rally in Nuremberg or something, that, loads of people. And suddenly they all just come into their bodies, feel that sense of space. They make that choice to be curious. And yeah, how can I be empathetic in this moment?
So there's this vision that keeps coming up to you, almost like the Nuremberg rallies, where everyone's standing there, and suddenly they make a big shift to be curious.
Yeah. How can, especially the scale, the vision I was just describing, it's to do with scale. How can, on a large scale, what we're describing involves time, space, slowing down, discussion. How can that be? Is it enough that just a small group of people, make the effort? Is it contain? Sorry, I'm not giving you space.
Yeah, so you just sound like you're struggling with how to sort of scale this up. Is it enough if just a couple of people are talking about this, exploring this, or it's like how to really scale it up, spread it widely, and just sort of maybe even struggling a little bit with that question.
Yeah. And this is obviously why this is why I so respect, your vision to have this culture of empathy. And how does a culture change? Because, certainly here in the UK, that there's so much corruption and selfishness, on the grand scale politically. I wouldn't want this just to be something that only affects a few people.
You just see all the social problems, the corruption that just happens in the UK and maybe in the whole world, all the sort of social whole world problems, cultural problems, and you want to be able to have some effect on that, not just sit in our little world here and talk with each other, but really change the larger culture. And I think I was hearing some appreciation for the cultural viewpoint that I've got.
Yeah, definitely. Edwin, definitely. Yeah, so I think it's so important that we can define what way of being is, because I think it's a very helpful perspective on other definitions. And I think the best way is just to live it, on a personal level, within daily interactions, in whatever situation. So it's embodying it, is the way it's going to change society.
Yeah, so the way to really change society is to maybe at an individualistic level embody it.
Yeah.
And that'll lead to some change, you think, hope.
Yeah, and definitely, running courses and doing all the things that you do to roll it out. And it's being sad. It's kind of rejoicing in what is happening and the individual changes, those individual facets and choices that are made to allow that way of being to evolve in ourselves and with those we're interacting with.
Yeah, so you are appreciating or celebrating what we are doing, making these changes, but there seems to be more.
Yeah, life is short, and it's like it feels like there is so much to do, and how, if I can't even describe or define it, how can I expect people who haven't spent any time on it, and how they.
Mhm. So if you're kind of like struggling with the definitions and making all this work, how can you really expect others who aren't even working on this to
But I
have an
do,
impact?
yeah, I do feel you begin, the things that you've both been saying, it really feels like it's beginning to be nailed.
Mm. Yeah, so what we're saying here, you do feel like it's starting to get nailed down,
Yeah.
something.
And it is a matter of making it as inclusive as possible. So when people say, oh, what do you mean a way of being, that we are able to just give the 5-minute elevators pitch or whatever.
So we do need to have a 5-minute sort of elevator pitch so that when we use these terms, a way of being, that we can quickly explain that.
Yeah, because I think, just sometimes one sentence, 2 sentences can make a big difference in, just the power of the speech in terms of other people feeling that empathy.
So speech can make a difference for people to feel the empathy. So having a good definition or some words to describe it can be impactful.
Yeah, and if it's going to be taken seriously, people evaluating, programs and things, that it hasn't. It's got to be this balance of touchy-feely, but also, you know, academically credible, and it's that balance that's important.
Yeah, so you're saying that be able to balance sort of the touchy-feely aspects, the felt experience aspects of it, and sort of the rigorous academic. You got to be able to balance those two aspects.
Okay, I feel fully heard, Edwin. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Then speak to Kara. Yeah, something I was thinking about is, we're in this discussion, we're looking at the term, the way of being. That's just what are ways of being. And that a whole nother topic is, what is the empathic way of being, right? That's the whole exploration. That's what the course is about. What we're trying to do is talk about a way of, what is even a way of being.
I heard you're reflecting on the idea that there's a couple of different conversations happening. So what is just the way of being? And then what is like an empathetic way of being, and how are they the same and how are they different? And what do we need to define first?
Yeah, and the way of being, I think that what's different is usually empathy is defined as like a process, a skill, an emotion. It's defined as these little components of life, right? And the way of being is saying that it's a bigger part of oneself. It's how one is in the world. And I think, yeah, and there's a difference in that. It's like, instead of the rooms in the house, it's the whole house. Let me write that metaphor down.
Yeah, get that right. That was a good one. So what I heard is that as you're thinking about defining these two different things, what you are noticing is there is a breaking down of a way of being as a process, a skill, as an emotion, sort of like the rooms inside of a house. and then also that the way of being, there's a way of being, and then the way of being, which is sort of like the whole house.
Yeah. So, and I think when you just say a way of being, people sort of naturally sort of sense it and get the picture of it, just the term itself. At least when I hear a way of being, I have that sense of, oh, it's this wholeness of how one is in the world. And I think that's the point that we're trying to make here, is that we're not talking about a room in the house, or one emotion that you suddenly had, or sort of a process that you do to solve problems. It's really who you are, sort of in your wholeness and your completeness. Yeah, and so it's that awareness.
So when you hear a way of being, you naturally just get that a way of being is a whole experience, not just a part of how you are being. It is a way of being. It is all inclusive.
Yeah. So um how to kind of explain that maybe in a little bit more detail. Doesn't need a whole lot of detail, but to compare what what it is not, maybe pointing out at some different types of ways of being. Somebody mentioned the Trumpian way, the communist way of being, the I don't know, capitalist, or there's so many, the psychopath way of being, you have parenting, you're a parent, there's the different parenting styles which sort of represent your way of being, right? Authoritarian, or authoritative, or permissive, or whatever. So yeah, having some samples of different ways of being, and even exploring what are some qualities of your way of being.
So I hear you're looking at this in kind of a training mode, and if you were doing that, going into starting off almost with a way of being as a whole thing, and then kind of talking about what is not a way of being, and then kind of breaking it down into the different types and the different styles, so that you can give that whole picture. If you say a Trumpian way of being, or a Nazi way of being, or a hippie way of being,
Mm.
that certainly creates an immediate image that is recognizable as a whole way of being.
Yeah, and I think it's important, for, especially with empathy, because empathy is often seen as just this quality you have. It's just, it's an important maybe quality, but not that it can be your whole core, your whole organizing principle and core for the way you are. And that's what I'm kind of directed towards. Is it's sort of a deep, deep part of who I am or want to be, or yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that for you, and what you are driving here with the empathy facilitation circles, is that empathy is more than just a quality. It's more than just a tool or a process. It can be your whole way of being. You can choose that as a entire way to exist all the time.
And yeah, and it has benefits. It has benefits for your own health, your own well-being, and for the well-being of the people around it. And also that it's a bit of an evangelical way of being, that you want to spread it to create the whole culture to be in this way of being, that I think the whole culture would just lead to everybody's greater well-being if everybody listens to everybody else, everybody's sensitive to the other person, takes time. I just think it's not just something for the heck of it. It's just creating greater well-being for everyone.
And so I hear that the way of being, the empathetic way of being, more than even beyond the empathy circles, is the way that it benefits not just the circle, but the culture, the human itself, plus the people around it, plus the people around those people, and how that almost a shared experience becomes evangelical, where you like, no, this is so good though, you need to know about this. And and that could be the way of being.
Yeah, for personal and for the whole culture. So that's the aspect that, using this, I see it as political. Like I want to create a political culture that has this way of being. So I guess I want to seeing it scalable. We can have an individual, we can have a family culture of this way of being. We can have also, a whole country or state or, culture.
So I'm saying, I hear you're seeing this like as a political culture, and in that way being able to make it scalable. So as we've been talking, and I'm adding things, but we saw the self, and then the group, and
Family.
then the community, the family, and then the culture, and then the globe.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, I feel fully heard.
Okay, well, we are right at an hour, well, hour and 20. Do we want to do another round, or do we want to kind of decompress together on what we've
I'm good
done?
with decompressing. Yeah, we said we'd go for about an hour. So
Mhm.
I've been taking notes. So I just have a way of what is a way of being, a way of being is compared to qualities of an empathic way of being, different types of being. So I'm starting to see a picture emerge how this way of being can sort of a framework, different buckets that, ideas can be thrown into to create a more of a picture. Yeah.
That makes me think DJ's thing where she had us all throw out words, and then she kind of boiled those down, and then boiled those down, and then boiled those down. I'm thinking with what we've come up with the last few calls on this, one of those kind of workshop ways of doing things would probably be really good.
Mm.
Because I
Yeah,
think you're right.
Yeah, I certainly get more of a picture how this can be introduced, in the course.
Yeah.
Like you said, that idea of mentioning that, Edwin, you said that when you mention way of being, people get a picture of that. I don't think I did initially because it was so broad, but I think as we've said tonight, actually giving examples, the Trumpian way of being, etc., then people, could jot down in chat, or whatever. Yeah, my way of being is, hippie or mothery or whatever. So I now have a clearer sort of image of how it can be opened up, and then in an empathy circle actually trying to define, okay, we all have our ways of being, but what is an empathetic way of being? And actually within the empathy circle, the task is, yeah, how would you respond? So they would be having conversations, or like we're having, and I think you need that. You need time to just sit with it and percolate around with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I added that. What is your way of being too?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And for some people, they won't necessarily reflect it on it at all. But so then it would be, well, if you were to ask your, one of your best friends, how would they describe your way of being? If you were to ask, your employer, if you have one, or your, how would somebody else describe your way of being? And, because not everybody has had the opportunity to be, self-reflective, self-aware.
Yeah, when I hear that, what is that question? What is your way of being? I don't have that. Well, I don't know. That getting the outside picture is good too, but it's
Yeah.
feel a little self-conscious about saying what my way of being is or something.
Yeah. Mm.
Well, and I completely, until you just said that, I forgot that there are whole bunches of people who've literally never self-reflect. And I know that. I know that, but knowledge is not transformation, and I forget it.
Yeah.
I forget. And how impactful an empathy circle talking about scalable processes, an empathy circle on this, not only as part of the training, but as a standalone thing to engage people beyond just the doing of the living, but to really experience what they're
Mhm.
living.
Mm, mm,
This could be, I mean,
mm,
absolutely part of this training, but a standalone training in and of itself that would have vast ripple effect.
mm.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
oh, so go ahead.
no, after you, sorry, Edwin.
Oh,
You
no,
go.
go ahead. I can
Go
hold
for
it.
it, Edwin.
Okay. Um, yeah, so I was just trying to get clarity. So you mean like looking at what is your way of being and then maybe comparing it to an empathic way of being, or how does it relate? So you're kind of exploring the
Yes.
your way of being as a sort of exercise or
So Wendy kind of laid it out, as you know, because we've already dived into this a couple of times now. So this is why having the extra perspectives are, because she was like, first the whole concept. Well, when we were like a whole way of being, we're like, yeah, it's a way of being. But for her getting those examples, these are some different ways of being. And then you're like, oh yeah, no, now I like immediately when you say a Trumpian way of being, a Nazi way of being, a hippie way of being, that you're like, oh, I know what that looks like. I know what that smells like. I know what that brings up in my body when you say those things. And then kind of breaking it down into the how to of empathetic being, kind of the choice of choosing curiosity
Mm,
over
mm,
suppression, and how that allows you to live a felt experience, and then asking that question,
mm,
what is your way of being? And then the ones that Wendy said that, how would your friends describe your way of being? How would your boss describe your
mm,
way of being? And really having someone being able to use the empathy circle process to
mm,
really allow someone to look at that in a safe
mm.
place.
be good for self-exploration and just having that sort of clarity, personal clarity, I think is what you're excited about, or
Just, I mean, the way I'm just thinking like your political culture thing, like if you took this as a stand, like obviously I think it is hugely impactful for the training in general, but as a standalone process to take this into those political arenas, because just because I look at somebody and be like, that's a Trumpster, that's a Nazi, that's a hippie, that doesn't mean that's how they feel their way of being is.
right. Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
And how being able to reflect, what does your boss say that your way of being, how does your friend see it, and then how do you see your way of being,
Oh, uh-huh.
the way that could, I mean, that alone is a scalable program where you can take that, and every time you have the same conversation, it's bigger and deeper and broader and brings in more to it.
I mean, as you're talking, Cara, as you before, I just was wondering if you could use this with McDonald's, in some,
In coaching, I'm like, oh my God, the applications for this.
well, just as a, I don't know, I don't know how long you're going to get to do your training with them, but what is a McDonald's way of being? What, if you're a McDonald's employee, what's your way of being? Okay, are there other ways of being? What do you think an empathetic way of being? And just leave it at that. It's not the bulk of your training because it's not, but just dropping these seeds. I just think seeds are so important. Yeah.
There was another aspect, is there's a process called dynamic facilitation. Are you either of you familiar with the process?
I've heard this. I'm
Not
not familiar with the process.
particularly.
It's yeah, if you look it up,
Yeah, I will.
there's dynamic, we just look it up, facilitation. And it started by I think a guy named Jim Ruff. And that's part of it. There's some explanations on YouTube, some videos that explain the process. And one of the people that built on it is Rosa Zubriziada. I think I can't never pronounce her last name, but she'd written a book on dynamic facilitation, and she and I had done a bunch of work together. So the thing with dynamic facilitation is it's actually built on active listening. but it's geared towards sort of documentation of what people are saying, and it is the process. The basic process is you've got you got some whiteboards, 4 different whiteboards up on the in front of the group that's doing this process, and you have a project like what is a way of being, and then everyone just sort of brainstorms, and there's no turn taking. Everybody can just sort of say what they want. But the facilitator just calls on people. So one person says, "Oh, I think it's this," and then the facilitator writes it up on one of the whiteboards under a problem, solution, or they have like 4 different headings, and they just do this sort of brainstorming, but they do the reflection. So the facilitator does all the reflection of what's being said. So it's empathically listening based on reflection. And you just people come from all different points of view, sharing. But the thing is the material gets organized as you go along, and they see it on the whiteboard. So you see your ideas being mapped there. So and then all the stuff gets written down, and then the facilitator goes through and then writes it all up at the end. So it turns into a finished document. So they've got examples of that finished document. So all that knowledge that's been generated gets the structure and the form, and then it gets posted. And in Europe, they're using it for policy decisions. So like, hey, do we build this road here or not? And then they have community events around it and gather the insights from all the community. So Rosa has been using empathy circles as a gateway to this, because when people first get together, there's a lot of pent up, so a need to purge all those frustrations of not being heard. And so she does an empathy circle with participants in small groups, so they get kind of heard and they get primed for this empathic way of being. And then they go into this process. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that the empathy circle, we don't have a really clear note-taking process to create knowledge, organized knowledge. And, I've taken a lot of notes, but then I see the notes and they're loosely organized. And then I just feel it's like too much work after the fact to spend a couple hours organizing them. So just that process, I'm trying to figure out how to do it more effectively. So I guess I'm just bringing that up. But in the dynamic facilitation is sort of one way that, yeah.
I don't quite understand the difference between problems and concerns. I suppose a lot of I mean, if we were to organize what we talked about tonight into those 4 categories, I suppose, I can see it'd be, I'm not sure what the data would be. Yeah, I'm just trying to visualize
What the headings, the headings, it was problems and solutions. So
and concerns and data, it says them. Yeah.
Oh, is it what it said? Yeah. So
Well, on the web, anyway, no, I think that's interesting. I haven't come across it, so I think recording a lot of the empathy circles and things, I mean, they must end up not really getting listened to some of the time, and I totally understand, that you can't just transcribe or include notes. And yet, I mean, there was some things Cara said, something you said, some things you said, I thought, we need to grab that, there was some great things in terms of definitions. So yeah, it's just, as you say, how to synthesize it all.
Yeah, there's the headings, the headings I had is what is a way of being as compared to, things that are not way of being. And then everyone has a way of being. What is your way of being, and qualities of an empathic way of being? So
Mm,
there are some kind of general headings that, are that did for me started to form like that.
mm. Yeah, good. Yeah. Yeah. It's
That might be something we can talk about Monday. On Tuesday with Colin. Like, how do we organize this material a little bit better? Because
yeah.
I see you taking a bunch of notes, Kara. So I don't know
I
if they.
got circles and swirls.
Yeah. Like, how do we? Yeah. How do we? I think that it's just something needing a better process in the empathy circle to harvest. Yeah, they call it
Yeah.
harvest within
Yeah.
within. There's one process. Can't remember what they call it now. The
That's
art
how
of hosting. Yeah, the art of hosting uses that term.
the decompression that we're doing. This would be a
Mm,
perfect place for that, right? So you do the empathy circle first, let everybody process and blurt out and go through, right? And then at the end, do one of those dynamic facilitations, be like, okay, just start sharing what you got. Not what I heard you say is this, cool, I'm gonna put that here. And what I heard you say is this, I'm gonna put that here. And what I heard you say is this, I'm gonna put that here. That would allow them to be like, well, I think that should go there, but it would maintain that empathetic energy while still allowing a decompression space and accurate data collection. That's like a win-win-win. You're a genius.
Yeah, it's like half an hour at the end where the
Mm.
decompression is we have the document, maybe
Mm.
screen
Yeah.
share it, and then we kind of work at it.
Yeah.
The other aspect is that's what I like about 4 or 5 people in the circle, because
Mm,
when I'm the listener, I can't take notes. And
mm,
then, so having more people, I'm able to take more accurate notes too. That's the other aspect.
Yeah.
And I think there's an overlap in that dynamic facilitation process that you just mentioned with the idea of the World Cafe type of approach, with big sheets of paper on the tables, and you move around, all trying to focus on the one question or whatever. It's that open spaceness that I think is really important in this course. So would you use in the defining empathy course, if you opened it up like we've just said about other ways of being, would you then have an empathy circle when people shared about what does an empathetic way of being mean for you? Would you then use that dynamic facilitation process and get them to organize in those 4 ways, or is this just something we're suggesting for this kind of
Yeah, I was
group?
thinking for this kind of a group,
Yeah,
and
okay.
also an additional tool on the empathy circle.
Yes.
Like it's the second step. Like there's a lot of
Yes.
second steps that
Yes.
need to be developed, like conflict mediation, a second module on that, going deeper, documentation direction. So
Good.
I'm thinking it more for us.
Yeah, no, good. Wonderful.
Okay, well, maybe it's something to discuss with Colin too.
Love it.
To be more effective. I feel it's like maybe even we could discuss sort of the blocks to that, because I've got the sort of blocks to this next step for documentation, and just to discuss it. This was helpful for me. Yeah. So okay. Well, any closing comments, Wendy and Kara?
I just want to know what's happening with this land. I'm just very curious and nosy, but you don't have to say if you don't want.
Oh, I'm glad to. Yeah, it's been purchased. I went down and visited. I got a cold going down there. Had I shown you the space?
Have you seen it, Wendy?
No.
Oh,
let me. Can I? Do you have a minute? I can just
if you don't
go
mind.
through.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
all I know is that you weren't able to be at the last session of the last cohort. And
Yeah, my brother bought the property. Oh, it's actually maybe a whole nother project for us to.
he wants you to manage it. Is that
Well, yeah, I'm kind of creating a website for a project website for it. So let me
haven't you
just.
got enough to do, Edward?
Well, it would be kind of like a empathy center. It'd be a physical worldwide empathy center. So this. Oh, are you seeing it?
Yeah,
On
yeah. So you've got buildings there already.
Oh yeah, it's this is, let me just do, I'll just,
Wow.
it's in the back of Santa Barbara, which is, a well-to-do area in Southern California.
Yeah.
So that's Santa Barbara in the back,
Yeah.
down, down below in the hills, and that's the ocean out there, and
Wow.
some islands out there too. But so it's 55,000 square feet on 35 acres, which is about, 16 hectares, I guess. It has a church, a little chapel, and then the north wing has been renovated, has a kitchen and, and kind of a group in a cafe and meeting room. And I'll just
Was it a
quickly.
convent or something? Or
It had been a seminary for
yeah.
Catholic priests, so it's got this chapel,
Wow. Wow.
so, and then down below is like underneath, and it has this accommodations for staff. There's
Wow.
7 rooms. This is the sort of a recreation meeting room.
Wow.
Oh, and wait, this is a recreation room. And then this is the cafeteria, so that's another big room. Has this kitchen all kind of decked
Yeah.
out, and this is loading for food and stuff.
Wow.
This is kind of the staff accommodation areas. This is another, other, and so half of it's been relatively renovated. And then there's another wing that's some dormitories that all that needs to be renovated. It's it's been for Catholic priests. They had, been in this, they
Yeah.
had these, and this was all divided by curtains and stuff. So it was like 80 people could stay in
Wow.
the dormitories. Plus there's probably another 30, spaces, 40 spaces.
So enough for over 100 people to stay at once.
Yeah. And that's the grounds. And then it's got a basketball court, and that's,
Oh my goodness, it's huge.
it is big. So we're
And
just trying to, he asked me if I were to manage it, and I would make it an empathy, part of it, at least an empathy center, have workshops and things.
what does he want it for?
He's got 3 things. One, make a retreat center, give it to a nonprofit to make a retreat center and use it as a tax write-off, or just hold it and resell it, in a couple of years.
Okay.
I mean, he's got a good deal, he feels on an auction, because previous owners, they had to sell it. I guess they ran out of money, so they had to
Yes.
put it up on auction. So
I mean,
yes.
it's so exciting and it's so daunting. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
once you start having property, it kind of can take over. And in terms of
Work, yeah,
Yeah.
attention, yeah. So anyway, it's something that I'm kind of working on right now too.
Well, I rejoice with your generosity and your acceptance of all of the, worldly hassles.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the situation. It's in development. We'll see what happens. It's
Well,
kind of
good luck.
progressing step by step. So,
Good luck.
yeah. Any
Okay,
close?
let's let you get on. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Any-
A joy to be with you both.
Any
Okay.
closing comment, Kara? just wanted to give you a closing comment too.
Oh, no, I'm so excited about that property. I love doing these circles. I'm so glad I get to participate in them. I'm so glad that we chose to do this one and not cancel it, because getting Wendy's perspective was, it, just adds more to the diamond. Yet another facet of fantastic.
Yeah, thanks. I feel the same way. It's great to get your feedback. It really enriches the whole kind of experience, and yeah, so thanks for that.
I
Okay.
feel fully valued and fully heard.
Okay, see you
Thank
Tuesday
you
next
so
Friday.
much. Thank you. Good
Mm.
night.
And I'll see you Tuesday, Edwin.
Tuesday, great.